Well, good morning, everybody. This is Gold Harbour Radio. You see, once the streaming gets turned on, I have to officially open the net. It is Friday, November the 2nd. Fantastic news for us. We love Fridays because it means we have the weekend. And today, I would have to say that we are sort of reeling after a tumultuous day yesterday here at Gold Harbour. The whole of the North Island, well, actually the upper half of the North Island got hit very badly yesterday with weather, and we sat on the ridge here being absolutely pummeled by west-southwest winds, 25 to 37 knots most of the afternoon, torrential rain in bursts on and off all afternoon. Fortunately, we did not have to go anywhere because we could not have gone anywhere. We're up on a ridge, and the road down below us is the main road. There's a long peninsula, folks, for those that don't know the Wonga-Poroa Peninsula. It sticks out like a finger. And for the most part, there is just one road that goes all the way along. And there are parts of it that if something happens, then everything is gridlocked. Well, something did happen at 12:15. We were just sitting having lunch, and below us on the main road, a car went out of control and hit a power pole, bringing down a power line. Now, that's always a bit of a drama because people can't get past. 5 hours later, the cars started to move again. Now, they can't get, because of this one road business, it's very difficult to get in emergency services. They finally do, but it was absolutely stopped, absolute gridlock for about 3 hours, and then they cleared one lane and sort of did bits and bobs. You would not believe how many cars built up on both sides. And during this windstorm, we watched the man up the pole right in front of us or down below us, blowing 35 knots. 2 men and a ladder arrived, and one poor guy gets to go up the ladder, and every time he sort of raised his head to try and cut off the supply to the broken line, his hard hat would take off behind him because he obviously didn't have it cinched down hard enough. And it took him a while, and we felt very sorry for him. But he got the job done. We lost power for a little bit. But, it was absolute mayhem. And David and I sat there watching all of this and thinking, gosh, we could make a fortune on this. We could go and, have a portable toilet maybe that people that were sitting there for 5 hours could use. And then we thought, well, we could encourage that by selling, first of all, nice cold beers, and then they would need to use the facility. I was going to make hot scones and go and sell them, but basically we didn't go outside because the weather was just too grim. It was really, really bad. So that's what sort of kept us entertained for the afternoon. That and trying to sort out one of the communications for one of the boats going around the world. Another lady has had some damage down the bottom of Tasmania. I think, David, did you want the microphone?
Yeah, I was going to say, when we were having lunch looking at all of this, it reminds me of when we decided to all quit work and go cruising. This is over 20 years ago. But just before we left to do our world cruise over 20 years ago now. But we would sit at the dock after we quit work. And we definitely would tune in on all of the reports, the traffic reports. And we'd be sitting there with our feet up and having coffee and whatever. And we just got great glee out of hearing accidents and backups and stop and go. I know that sounds nasty, but
yes, it is nasty.
We just got a real kick out of that.
Yeah, I can still remember the chaos at Spaghetti Junction. This was San Francisco, where we started from, and it always seemed to be absolute mayhem there. But anyway, today it's totally different. We have blue sky, a very crisp 13 degrees, folks. 13 degrees. That's not very warm, is it? But boy, it's really nice. I'm just trying to find my piece of paper that I've got all my news on. This is very interesting. Hang on a minute. David's going to no. Well, where is it? I've got a bit of a problem here. I'm going to give the microphone back to David.
Well, okay. What can we talk about? Yes, well, Patricia's probably mentioning about these ladies that are doing this round the world race. It sounds like a race, I guess, and they've got some pretty interesting rules. We started to get involved by giving the weather to one of the yachts, one of the gals, and at the time she was pretty much in the Australian bight, and she was getting hammered by 45 winds and seas up to about 8 meters. And then it turns out that they weren't able to, the way the rules and so forth were, as they couldn't tell us where they were going to be. In other words, they would ask us, what their conditions were going to be like for the next 3 days without saying where they were going to be. So you would have to estimate where they were going to be. Well, this is impossible to do because picture a boat. Most of these winds were behind her. Fortunately, she didn't have to put out a drogue or anything like that. But you can't guess what they're going to be. And down in the Southern Ocean where she is, if you were to look at the shape of these depressions, not so much up where you all are now, but these are very narrow, steep looking, if you look at the isobars, they look like ice cream cones. They're very compact. And if you miss the location, the lat long of where they are, you could be on one side of the axis or the other side. And that means the winds could be almost 180 degrees apart. And when we realized that this was happening, because then we would get a report that no, they got a different wind, they said, yeah, but you can't tell us where you are. How can I possibly give you a forecast if you don't tell me where you are going to be at a certain time? And that's when we found out about these rules. So we bailed out. We just can't do that. It's just a waste of time. So she's found her stuff, folks. Here we go.
Well, it was right in front of my eyes, and I'm just reading on streaming, thanks Trevor, that a boat has sent out a mayday 7:30 this morning. It's now 8 o'clock New Zealand time. It's run into the Polar Knights islands just north of here, north of Whangarei, anyway, the Polar Knights. So that wouldn't be very good. Indeed, Opua had pretty similar weather to us yesterday by the sound of it, 30 gusting to 40. So pretty much exactly the same from here through to Northland. I just hope that nobody was trying to come in at that time. As you can tell, we are very, very anxious for people to not come into New Zealand with those sorts of conditions. It's just really, really nasty. So trying to deal with that. Particularly from that direction. Okay, I'm going to quickly run through some news because we want to spend more time on the weather today for those folks that are going to be leaving sometime over the weekend or early next week. Good that you've been patient, particularly those folk in Minerva who will probably have quite a nice trip later on. Anyway, the news from Antarctica. Now, we don't often have news from Antarctica, but for the first time, there has been an attempt at murder in Antarctica. It was at the Russian research station of Bellinghausen.
Whoa.
2 Russians who have been there for 4 years, so they must be getting a bit fed up with it. One of them got absolutely fed up with the other one telling him how books ended. And after a while, he got so mad that he attacked the guy with a knife to the heart. So there you have it. And David should pay attention to this because he has the habit of sitting here. We're reading the paper and we split the paper up. And he tells me what he's reading. So by the time I get that paper, it's kind of lost its interest. So just keep this in mind.
I'll be careful.
Yes, you will be very careful. Anyway, the guy is not dead yet. He was whooped to Chile and he's in intensive care. So there you have it, folks. Be very careful when you are reading something that the other person's going to read, that you don't spoil it for them. The supercars are on this weekend. Now, I know not a lot of you are petrol heads, but it's a very exciting weekend at Pukekohe, and it's going to be the same weather that we had last weekend. It's a major Holden versus Ford event. The two main, there is a Nissan or two in the picture, but basically the competition is between Holden and Ford. It used to be between New Zealand and Aussie drivers, but the two leaders are actually Kiwis. And of the top 5 in the leaderboard, 4 are Holden, which of course we're supporting. But the one at the top is McLaughlin, and he drives a Ford. So it's going to be a very exciting weekend at Pukekohe, particularly as on Sunday it will be a pretty snotty weather, on and off rain, so the tyres will be changed or not changed and causing troubles or whatever. Anyway, it's going to be a very exciting weekend for the drivers. Going to the the Indonesian plane, the Indonesian 777 that crashed, they have found one of the black boxes. Of course, it's not black. It's a bit like the green card. I was very disappointed when I finally got my green card to find that it wasn't green. But the black box was actually kind of a fluorescent reddy, orangey colour. Anyway, they have found that, and they've also found a bit of the fuselage, so there should be some information coming from that. A lot of elections are on this weekend or early next week. Midterm elections on Tuesday in America. It's really hard reading the news. Mind you, of course, there's a lot of false news. Well, what does he call it? Fake news, that's right, fake news. But on the one hand, you read that some of the Republicans in certain states are doing really well and others they're not. So it's going to be a very interesting midterm election there. Mr. Trump is really hammering the immigration problem. He reckons he's going to send 15,000 troops to the border now with Mexico. So that's going to be a fairly major one, particularly for the border states. And of course, this weekend we have the election in New Caledonia. That's going to be an exciting one too. NIWA, talking about the weather, I was just chatting to Diego before. NIWA have issued their quarterly predictions. Now, I'd have to, before I tell you what they are, I have to tell you that they're not often very accurate. But anyway, they do this. It sort of keeps them busy for a bit. They issue the quarterly predictions, and they have told us that November is going to be hotter than normal. I'm not sure that that covers today, which started at 13 degrees. But anyway, November is going to be hotter than normal. So you folk that have held off a bit will hopefully have decent weather by the time you get here. It does mean, of course, that food hygiene is important. Chicken in New Zealand has a high risk of Campylobacter poisoning in the summertime. People buy cooked, chopped up chicken and then sort of leave it in the car and then leave it at the beach and then finally eat it. Please be careful with products like chicken or any comminuted meat. When you buy it, we really do need to be mindful of A, hygiene, and B, refrigeration. In the summertime in New Zealand, there's nothing spoils a good day than a good dose of food poisoning. And the weather is quite the opposite. In Europe, of course, you're getting more film now. Diego sent some absolutely horrendous pictures from Liguria, the beautiful marina, or the boats in the marina at Rapallo, just actually not too far from Margarita or Portofino area there. Just got absolutely hammered with lots destroyed. But there has been other pictures. There was one we watched before, a very big ferry in Barcelona just got swept into a container dock, well, not the word containers at this particular part, and hit one of the very big cranes, which collapsed over the other side and then burst into flame and basically destroyed that particular big finger. So there's been some spectacular stuff. And the same in Auckland, as we had yesterday, the wind destroyed a very big building, the walls that hadn't been fully finished, and that collapsed. It's just been a period of weather interest. Typhoon Yutu smashed into the Philippines a couple of days ago, 95 miles per hour. There's just been horrendous weather. That's about it, really. For those that travel, Ryanair sort of the lower cost carrier in the UK, now charges for bags that you put in the overhead locker. The only bag you can bring on is your handbag or whatever that fits under the seat in front of you. They now charge £8 for something that you have to carry on and you have to put in the overhead locker. Needless to say, that's not going down very well with passengers. But it's good if I ever get myself, I designed this new sort of trench coat, that woman particularly, because it always annoys me that we're allowed the same weight as men and yet they are about twice as big, and we get to have the same amount of weight of luggage. So I've designed in my mind this very big, well, it's not a big trench coat, it's a trench coat that fits but has enormous pockets in it, so that you can basically put all your luggage, dog kit and everything in these massive pockets, that there would be at least 4 huge pockets on this thing, and therefore they would have to let you on, and then you could just hold it up and put it in the overhead locker without paying your £8. I just need somebody to start producing it. I guess I have to go to China for something like that. No, I'm not. Okay. All right. So that's about it for me. We've got a report, thank you, Michael, from Muscat Cove. It's Andiamo. They're still planning to leave next week. Currently up there, it's scattered cloud. 1016.8 east-southeast at 12 to 16, gusting a little bit, and nice temperature in the low 20s. It does sound nice. All right, I'll just have a brief pause in case there's anybody with anything in particular, and then we'll go to the weather. I think what we might do is go to anybody after. I think there was someone there, but it would take some time to weed you out of the murk there. I would need a relay. So what we'll do is go to weather. That might answer any questions, and then we can come back later. Here's David.
All right, good morning, everybody, and time to look at our 500th millibar analysis. No moaning. All right. A shortwave trough lies just barely east of New Zealand. We've been talking about these troughs now for the last couple of weeks. The axis is pretty much the dateline, and that means that the maximum upflow area is just east of East Cape, or east of the dateline. So picture what Dashu describes as a vacuum cleaner at altitude. That's a good analogy, I think, sucking up surface air. In fact, this is exactly what is happening. On the surface, we'll find a very nicely wrapped up depression that's extending a cold front over the cruising route. In fact, it's on its way to Minerva Reef, and any of those folks who left a wee bit prematurely from Minerva would have encountered it, although in talking with Tusi2, all they got last night were a bit of cloud and whatnot, but nothing much in the way of interest had happened. I could see it quite clearly on satellite imagery. Most of the cloud is fairly low cloud. I don't see any heavy rain-bearing clouds, but it is in fact a cold front, meaning that we do have a different density numbers on either side of the axis. Usually we do get a bit more than what Tusi2 described, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. Now, just to the west of this 500 trough that we talked about is a very well-developed ridge. Now, this creates downflow, and that builds and supports a surface high. And that also is what's happening. We've got a very nicely formed, I'd say a 1029 to 1030 millibar high that's centered roughly near 32 and 168 east. 32 and 168 east. That's more or less the center of this anticyclone. So we'll take a look at the winds today and for the next couple of days. At 25 to 30 south, we're looking at southerly quadrant winds, and they're 20 to 25 knots near the dateline, and I would say 25 to 30 on Saturday as well, possibly southeast 25 from Fiji down to 26 south. So basically, we've got quite a bit of breeze, and that all is because of the slight squash zone between that depression that's to the east and that building high that we've got in the Tasman. Then when we get down to 26 to 28, we're looking at east-southeast about 20. And at this point in time, we're getting close to the center of the high. And the winds at that point are going to back to become easterlies. So at 30 south, once you get down there, there's going to be very little wind. In fact, it's probably going to be a motor day. This is Saturday now. On Sunday, we're looking at westerlies from 30 south to New Zealand. So Sunday between 30 south and New Zealand, westerly wind. So you can see the elongated ridge, if you will, that's centered more or less at 30 degrees south. Now, Monday, we're going to be looking at southerly quadrant winds, and there's probably going to be a weak front that will occur sometime between Sunday and Monday, and that's going to provide a little bit of entertainment for those of you that will be arriving at about that time. Now, moving to the yachts in Minerva. Today, we'll be looking at south to south-southwest, roughly 20 knots, and depending upon what that cold front does when it finally gets there, you can certainly have a little bit more breeze on these downflow winds. By Saturday, we're looking at southerlies about 20 knots. Mean wind 20 knots. We discussed what I meant by that yesterday. So I would say consider a departure on Sunday, the 4th of November. We don't give advice, and that sounds like it, doesn't it? But let's just say if it were Chameleon or yacht, we probably would, if we were at Minerva, we would consider leaving on Sunday and not Saturday. And that looks at an arrival approximately Friday, the 9th or thereabouts. The winds at that point should be north to northwest as the next cold front is approaching New Zealand from the west, of course. This will be a reasonable run from Minerva Reef. I think you'll have a pretty good sail out of this. There may be one or two hiccups on the way, but otherwise I think it will be okay. Now, the very next frontal band looks to be around Tuesday the 13th, and that will be preceded by northwest winds. Now, the yachts in New Caledonia, a lot of you have left, and then there's a bunch that are leaving today or Saturday. Today's winds are pretty fresh in New Caledonia. We're looking at east-southeast, about 20 knots in the mean. Saturday is a much better day regarding wind with easterlies, and that is pleasant to get out the pass with easterlies. We've done it in fresh southeasterlies, and it's a pain, particularly if the currents are not cooperating. So anyhow, easterlies sounds pretty good. They'll be fairly fresh in any case, but at least it's a pretty good direction. And then, given a 5 to 6 day passage to New Zealand, that puts you here around the 8th or the 9th. And at that point, we should have reasonable northwest winds, fairly moderate, I'd say, in the 15 knot range. So the passage looks pretty good at this point. The latest runs, and the latest runs that I've gotten are early this morning, because I got up pretty early. So hopefully all of this is correct. We'll be keeping you involved or informed as the days go on, and we'll see how things go. So there we have it. We have pretty good runs from New Cal to here to New Zealand and Minerva Reef, or Tonga if you scoot down to Minerva. So from there to New Zealand, and that's with essentially Saturday to Sunday departures. Now, those of you leaving Fiji this weekend, might find today okay for departure conditions, quite fresh tomorrow, but lighter air again on Sunday. So that would be arrival in 7 to 8 days approximately, and that would put you Sunday or Monday the 11th or the 12th thereabouts. I have my dates right. And possibly a frontal band prior to arrival, fairly weak with southerly quadrant winds that are following, but it's hard to tell. Some yachts, I think, are scattered so much. It's sort of like dust in the wind. We've got yachts that are virtually everywhere. So if you want better information regarding wind strength and direction for the next day or so, you'll have to give us a call on the radio and give us what your coordinates are going to be. Or, since we're not on this weekend, you could email us and we'll do our best to get back to you as fast as we can. Okay, that's the passages. Now moving to the islands themselves, we'll take a quick look at the weekend winds, and starting with Tonga, as we usually do on satellite imagery, I'm looking at plenty of cloud bands for Nui Tupatapu and also Vavau, and we'll stick the Hapais in there as well. But Tongatapu looks fair, quite nice down there. Now, actual reports, Vavau, southeast 5, scattered to broken there. Earlier showers, and the barometer 1016. And the Hapais, southeast 6 knots, scattered as well, barometer 1016, same as Vavau. Tongatapu, south-southwest at 5 knots, pretty light air as you could see, scattered cloud, barometer 1017. So very little in the way of pressure gradient to give you any kind of wind, so that's pretty good. My wind forecast then by lunch today, south-southeast, I'm going to call it around 15 knots, and I think you'll have southerlies later on in the day. Saturday, south to south-southwest, 15 to 20, and Sunday, south-southeast in the 20 knot range, and looking at Monday, east-southeast, I'd say around 15 knots. Over to Fiji, shows plenty of cloud on imagery, but quite a few breaks. The trough axis is to the north. Rotuma is getting the good news. The main group weather, I think, is going to be mostly fine, except for the northern bits of Fiji. And those bits are close to the southern edge of this trough. Saturday looks pretty good as well. Now, radar this morning shows showers pretty much over southeastern Viti Levu and the western Horo Sea. Also showers over northern and northeastern Vanua Levu. That's about all I see. There's a few returns here and there, but nothing to write home about. Winds by lunch today, southeast 15 to 20. Saturday a little bit stronger. I'm thinking southeast 20 to 25 knots out in the open waters and away from the wind shadow areas. Sunday east-southeast around 20 knots, and on Monday east-southeast 15 to 20, a little bit lighter on Monday. Over to Vanuatu, Vanuatu lies just south of the main trough that runs from the Solomons. Now there's a separate cloud band. It does have rain in this, and it does roll over northern Vanuatu when I'm viewing the loop this morning. So the winds today by lunchtime are quite fresh. I'm looking at southeast to 25 knots. On Saturday, a little bit of backing. We'll call it east-southeast 25 knots. And on Sunday, I'm going to go with easterlies in the 20 knot range. And lastly, over to Newcal, where the satellite loop does show a fair amount of cloud. All of this cloud is part of the anticyclonic flow from the high to the south. We commonly call that, affectionately call that, anticyclonic gloom. Not that bad for DuCal. There's lots of breaks there, but oftentimes it gets pretty dark with quite a bit of cloud, and it looks like something is going to happen, but it never does. And usually that's cloud that develops. The surface heats up a bit, and being over the ocean, of course, there's a lot of moisture. That moisture rises, hits the inversion layer, so we get a lot of stratocube that builds up and forms huge sheets of cloud, and that is where we get the anticyclonic gloom expression from. Anyway, winds, well, hold on to your hats is about the best thing that I can see. We're looking at east-southeast winds, 20 to 30 knots. No lagoon exploring in these conditions, folks. Still pretty strong tomorrow as well, 20 to 30 knots. A little bit more in the way of easterlies, though. The wind drops by the afternoon on Saturday, and on Sunday, I think we're looking at east-northeast, just a little bit north of east, about 12 to 15 knots, and roughly the same thing on Monday. So that's what I've got for the next couple of days. Those of you on passage, stay safe. And again, any questions come now, but over the weekend, if you've got something that you need to know about, feel free to email, and we'll get back to you. So here's the chief.
Just to clarify that anything that comes in on Sunday, we've got a really busy day. You won't get a reply until Sunday night. David, I just get him working the streaming cut out in Fiji for a little bit. And so if you could just repeat the thoughts of the Monday departure and the arrival, whatever it is that you had to come in by. I'm not sure about that, the arrival around the 12 to 14, if you could cover that. We've had a report for those folk of you who are in New Caledonia. Another adventure left yesterday, and Frank has reported from 242423 south and 166 east. He's got 16 to 18 knots of east-southeast at the moment, 40% cloud cover, 2 metre, 2 to 2.5 southeast swell, and 1026 on the bar. So he seems to be doing well, except he's looking forward to smoother conditions tomorrow, but that still looks a pretty good passage from him. I wouldn't mind knowing, I presume the boats that we knew that were in Tonga coming to New Zealand, and we had Mana and Minya and Kojian and Sea Cloud and Sensation. I presume you have gone to Minerva, but if you haven't, then I presume you've heard the weather forecast there. Just update us on what you're doing if you can. But I'm just going to go back very quickly to Fiji to New Zealand for scoots.
Well, the winds this weekend for Fiji, what I said was we're looking at about southeast 15 to 20 for today, and tomorrow a little bit stronger, southeast 20, maybe up to 25 knots, and Sunday east-southeast around 20. And looking at Monday a little bit lighter, east-southeast 15 to 20. Now, a whole bunch of boats were talking about leaving this weekend. And what I had said was that would give an arrival around the 7th, or in 7 or 8 days, which would put it about Sunday the 11th, or maybe Monday the 12th. And on that passage, there will be a possible frontal band that does not look like very much to it. And arrival time, basically we're looking at, well, it all depends on when you do get there and when the second frontal band does arrive. Most of the yachts are fairly scattered at the moment, so we've got all kinds of arrival dates. And I just didn't have the time to pick every day of out 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 days to tell you what the winds are going to be, because it's not going to be very accurate anyway. All you need to know is that there is a frontal band to encounter. It doesn't look like much. We're looking at the best arrival times are going to be about the 11th or the 12th, That means that's about an 8-day passage, which is normal from Fiji. Not a particularly great passage, but it is doable. So if you're waiting until the first part of next week, you'd best listen to us on Monday when we have far more updates, and we'll be able to give you a better arrival type weather. But I really do need your ETAs. We're losing sight of that. People are telling us, well, we want to go Saturday, we want to go Sunday, we want to go Monday. That's nice. But unless you give me your ETA, it's not going to do me much good because the most important weather is your arrival weather. And believe me, this last week, if you've arrived in some of the conditions that we've had, you would definitely be an unhappy chappie, believe me. So when you do make requests, please give us an ETA. I'm more interested in that than your departure day, because virtually everybody could handle a little bit of choppy weather departing. Your tummy may not like it, but usually the weather isn't all that bad. But it certainly is worse as you get closer to New Zealand. Okay, here's the chief.
And I'm just going to read something that's going to make your heart feel so good, David. This boat, Scoots, is leaving hopefully on Monday because they can't leave Sunday. But she's seen a closed circle on the 500 millibar charts between Fiji and New Zealand. There we go. Somebody's looking at the 500 millibar charts. And so wondering what you would comment on that. That's on New Zealand. Well, that's between the 7th and 9th of November. Do you have any comments? He's going to take a look at that. So good to know that people are looking at what's controlling your weather. And if there's anybody else, whilst David is just looking at that again, I'll pass the microphone.
All right, I haven't pulled down my 500 charts to see that, but that's fantastic that people are looking at it. I can tell you what is happening on or around the 9th, and that is we've got a very, very well wrapped up depression that's to the west of New Zealand. Actually, the west of Fiordland is where the center of this is. Looks like about a 9-9, can't tell, maybe a 990, something like that. A pretty deep low, let's put it that way. And that's extending a frontal band all the way up to, it's north of Harvey Bay, somewhere up there north of Harvey Bay. Anyway, what a closed upper level trough means when you see circular iso heights, and those circles represent the height of the 500 millibar level. That's a pressure level measured in height. So when it closes off like that, it usually means that that's pretty much the end of the development of the surface low that it is supporting. It doesn't mean that the low is getting any less in intensity, but it means it's probably not going to get any worse. And it also means it's probably slowing down in movement. Now, we talked the other day about how fast lows can go, and oftentimes they can go 20 to 30 knots. That's the physical movement of the depression itself. And so add on to that the wind that's within it. You can see how these things could be pretty nasty. So that it's slowing down. It's probably reached full development, and until I look and see what the plan is on that 500 millibar, we won't really know how quickly it will leave the New Zealand area. But very good that you looked at that. So we'll comment more on that on Monday.
All right, is there anybody else with anything? And we actually have some beautiful sunshine and shadows at the moment, so that's all good. We'll catch up on a couple of the boats on the Hamnet later, hour and a half away. Is there anybody else? Nothing heard. Have a very good weekend, everybody. We'll look forward to following progress. Our email, by the way, is ghradio@extra.co.nz. I think just to remind you that some of you have had trouble with our email going into spam, because when you get a reply back, it's from our house one, which is our boat name, Chameleon House it is, and the word chameleon seems to trigger a spam alert, and some of our emails have been going into spam depending on your server and whoever you use. So just check that. We generally do reply to all emails, unless there's been an awful lot come in and we've got a bit lost. But other than that, we do reply. So just check your spam. Okay, cheers everybody. Have a very good weekend. We'll be back on Monday morning. This is Gulf Harbour Radio, clearing the frequency.